tunnel was opened with a very strange opening ceremony, which left a lot of people bewildered as to what it meant. And after a number of my subscribers sent me messages to investigate the ceremony at Gotthard Tunnel, and after my lengthy research into the reptilian monument symbolism within the Pope's own audience hall at the Vatican, I finally made the connection to the tunnel directly. So stay tuned as the Outer Dark brings you 5 ways the Gotthard Tunnel opening ceremony predicts the end of the world. Number 5. First, some context. In June, the end of a long construction of a tunnel called the Gotthard Tunnel was finished, and thus an opening ceremony ensued. But to understand what this is, we have to understand who this opening ceremony was for. Since it was attended by the most powerful people in Europe, it was in effect an opening ceremony for a specific crowd. Why can I say that? Well, because of many reasons, but one, namely the dark occult symbolism, is something that is not a language that is understood by the mass public. This is a symbology and language only understood by a few people at the heights of power. The occult in essence being a hidden form of knowledge kept from the public, but in this case this occult knowledge is in fact the dark occult, knowledge used by cryptocratic groups at the heights of power. Number 4. Well, the best place to start is at the beginning and then go through the sequence of events in order so you can get an understanding of the overall ceremony in its context. And I'll brush over these because I'm going to go into a bit more interpretation afterwards. The ceremony was 50 minutes long, so I'll be pointing out only the main timeline of events and the most prominent parts. First, it begins with the introduction of workers, all in orange jumpsuits and hard hats, as you can see here. They're all in a type of uniform. They're working. This, in my interpretation, is synonymous with the public in general, the main workforce of the elites. A group of white then appears and brings in a winged angel with a deformed, unhuman head and black eyes. This angel then fights with the workers or the public and seems to kill many of them. The workers seem afraid of this entity. A type of war ensues between the workers and this entity, but it's short-lived. It's more like a massacre more than a war. That is, the public is in fact decimated in this context. Now is the most ominous part, for now after much of the workforce is decimated, we see the installation of what looks like a new era, where there are groups of people with horns above their heads stating, and get this, we accept the goat man as our god. This will make sense later, but for now comes what looks like a new race of humans. They are different from the other workers and they're naked, like the fallen angel with black eyes. They're all dressed in white, just like the angel also. And now is when everyone seems to just disappear, and we have a single old man on the scene. He's on a very open area and he's rattling bells. He is standing, and this is important, before what seems like a long line of light. And at the end is a black circle. Remember these details because they'll matter later. It is at this point, as the black sun appears, that we have an actual half-human or half-goat man appears in what seems like child form. Note the large head, which is synonymous of a younger formed animal. This, of course, within the occult is Baphomet, or as in Satanism is actually the devil, or synonymous with it, whether you note it as a spiritual entity or a psychological one. The young goat man then meets the old man. The old man is convincing the young goat human to follow him, singing to him. I believe in this context that the old man is in fact synonymous with the actual elite themselves. But it is at this time that the mood changes heavily. In fact, the entire scene turns red. Now there is a celebration with the sacrifice of animals, and the location now changes to outside. Once at the new location of the opening ceremony, we have next another group of workers who are outside. They're before a mountain range and they seem to be in front of a giant moving image of what looks like iconography of the black sun. At this point they remove their clothes, becoming in essence the same set of individuals that ushered in the half-goat man. It is at this point that these individuals are sprayed with a type of white mist. Once the mist clears, they are different. They all look bewildered and looked confused, like their mines have been dulled heavily. Next we're showing a massive meteor on screen behind the workers, and the people look afraid. We see that now there are 3 men left hanging. This is symbolic of the last remaining workers or public, I think, dying. The rest of the workers are sucked up into what looks like a vortex, at which point now 3 ghostly figures rise from in front of the vortex, all dressed, and this is important, in white long shrouds. They float for a while, and then a massive eye appears behind them. They now usher in fact, an order of people wearing shrouds, behind which, and get this, now we have a fully grown goat man arrives. So we can say that these white shrouded peoples are some kind of protection line of this entity. They're revealing themselves now because there's no one left on stage to actually question their identity or ideology. The adult goat man now starts dancing on stage. On screen we have a massive man screaming and rising from the flames, where we see a superimposed goat's head actually coming down upon his face, symbolic of the entity that has not only crossed into our world, but also now seems fully open within it, in fact ruling it. Next, a woman in a white shroud drapes a half white shroud over the half goat man and states, and get this, "You are now the king of the world." So what does this all mean? Well, number 3, remember that this is just not any occult ritual. This project cost 11 billion euros, or roughly 128 billion US dollars. And now look at the stage and who is watching. You have a crowd of maybe 400 people. That is a very small crowd for such an event. This is a ceremony for the most wealthy and influential people in power. Since there might be onlookers from the overall crowd not on stage, this ceremony is for the people in the stands. The ceremony is also full of course, satanic symbolism. I think that is fair to say. Whether you think that in this case the satanic symbolism is a psychological belief, philosophy, or ideology, or real belief in some kind of entity that's going to cross into our world. Now this is all very ominous because of a single reason. Why? Not just because of the blatant references to Satanism, but something else. The fact that it is cross-connected to the very occult symbolism that we have seen before. Where, you ask? Well, number 2, and I know I have gone into this in a lot of detail on my channel, and you're probably tired of hearing about it, but all this relates back to, of course, the other form of iconography that is projected into the public, and that is the Bank of America mural, because this narrative and symbolism at the opening ceremony is no doubt mimicked within the Bank of America mural itself. But first, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, and don't worry, I will not go into this in detail, I'm just going to brush over it. Roughly a month ago, when I was looking at the Bank of America mural, specifically this third panel, I found out when I mirrored it that the half a heart, as on this panel, actually becomes a whole heart, and then mimics heavily the actual iconography within Freemasonry. Note the checkerboard pattern on the floor, note the pillars, note the astrological objects above the pillars, note the fact that Jacob's ladder is on the left and the right. There was no doubt about it. This is a cross-reference symbolism from Masonic tradition, or at least a mystic school of it. But what does this have to do with anything? Well, let me explain. And in order to do this, we have to go to all 3 murals again. These tell a narrative similar to the narrative projected at the ceremony, from left to right. We see that the actual hard-hatted individuals or the worker force are depicted in the first mural. Note the sleeping giant above land, which of course when mirrored becomes the actual Eye of Providence again. So the Eye of Providence itself, or in this case the all-seeing eye, is actually symbolic of some kind of coming ideology that is synonymous with the sleeping giant itself. Now, let's look at the middle mural, which depicts some kind of coming cataclysmic event with a fiery sun with people inside it. All the people inside the actual camp, which looks like a FEMA camp here, actually have nothing on their signs. They don't have anywhere to go, and they don't have anything to say. Now you can probably understand the references or cross-references with the cataclysmic event depicted in the ceremony for yourselves, and how that relates to the sleeping giant, the middle panel, and the first one. Probably even if you look closer, the hard hat workers seem in both narratives. In this case, they're both working underground. with the hard hat workers depicted in the first ceremony in the first location as working within a tunnel environment. Probably even the meteor symbolism you can see here in the last panel, which if mirrored turns from a burning bush into two meteors, with you can see a smoke trail behind them. This of course depicts the meteor on screen in the opening ceremony for the tunnel itself, so here we have another cross symbolism. These are all key symbolisms I think, but perhaps the most key symbolism is this. I want to just go back to the ceremony for a second and now have a look where the old man stands. He stands in a long trail of light, where at the end there is a black sun. Now let's go back to the Bank of America mural and take a look at the black sun here at the end of a long trail of light. I think this is very important because this gives us a time frame or a key event. Now we know that this event is a precursor to the arrival of the half-goat, half-man entity, which arrives within the symbolism. Again, these are all cross narratives and they make an overall picture. You have to ask, what does this giant symbolism mean? Since a sleeping giant under the ground is used in a number of different locations as sculptural elements as well. Here we have the sleeping giant, which is synonymous with the all-seeing eye, so I think this is also references the coming event of what happens after the black sun. So how does this all link with the Vatican, you're asking? Well, of course, if you follow my channel, you'll know that this iconography of the black sun is used by the Black Jesuits themselves and within the mystic schools of the Catholic Church. It's also symbolic, at least the all-seeing eye, which was depicted at the ceremony as the all-seeing eye as depicted within Pope's audience hall and a number of different locations. Of course, the half-goat, half-man is symbolic of Satan, and in fact the reptilian monument in the Vatican is symbolic of, well, Satan again. Also, the Vatican uses an acronym for their telescope, which stands for Lucifer. So all these are a bunch of questions that I think should be answered, or at least hope should be answered one day. But again, it's all interpretive, so you have to decide for yourselves what this all means. Go out and do your own research and decide for yourselves. I, of course, am just searching for breadcrumbs in the dark here. It's really hard to make a whole picture if you aren't part of this occult school and don't have access to this knowledge and mechanisms of how it works.